Question we get asked quite a lot in the shop, what Silver Pigeon have I got? And the Silver Pigeon model, if you like, has been out in different formats, probably certainly 30 plus years, but it was called something else before. Just remember that these guns are built on exactly the same action as something like a 687 EELL. Yes, it might have expensive side plates, it might have ornate engraving, it might have luxury walnut, but it's exactly the same mechanically. So I thought what I'll do is I'll do a quick video, a run through of essentially the 686 Silver Pigeon and just hopefully help people identify what they've got. And that's about it really. Beretta is one of the oldest manufacturing companies in the world, founded in 1526, so it's coming up to 500 years old. The honest truth is that up until the 680 series action was produced by Beretta, the shotguns they made weren't particularly great. So they made some shotguns in the 70s, which was the S55, 56, etc. And you know, there's not many still going because they weren't that well made. Fast forward to the late 1970s, I think it was about 1978 or 79, and they launched the 680 series action. So the earliest one we've currently got available to look at is this one. So this is the 686S. The S, I understand, is just series 686. With this style of engraving, this was the very first of the 686 guns. So prior to that, you had the 680, which was completely plain in the action, and then the 686, which has got this sort of floral engraving, was 1982 or 3-ish, maybe slightly earlier than that. So initially they came out, they had a trap version and a game version. They didn't have a sporter to start with because, of course, sporting didn't really come into the forefront till sort of the 1985-6 and onwards as a discipline worldwide, to be fair. And they also did a trap gun, which was 29.5 inch. So the 686 was born, and historically, from then on, the 686 was always a scroll engraved model. So if you've got anything with scroll engraving, from the last 30 years, it will be some kind of 686, and we're going to talk about the different models and when they came about and when in a little while. So this is the gun that really put Beretta on the map, and because it just worked so well. It was got better machining and better parts, better durability quality than the previous stuff, which was the S56, 758, etc., which wasn't particularly good, and I would imagine most of those are now washing machines or wheelbarrows, and whereas these are still going. This particular gun is about 1990, but the engraving pattern is exactly the same as when they first brought it out in about 82 or 3, I think. So you've got a coin finish action with the synonymous Beretta Trident logo on the bottom. You can see this model is a sporting one because it's got sporting written on the trigger guard, and if that didn't give it away, obviously it's got the wider rib and the ventilated barrels. So this gun, if we go back to about 1988-89, would have cost sub 700 quid. If you look at what they cost then and what they cost now, they haven't really lost any money. You go back to, like I said, mid-80s, they started to produce these with multi-chokes. They did sporting versions and field versions, and much like today, the sporters have got matte barrels that are ventilated. The game would have had a 6mm rib with auto safety, a bit less wood in it, etc, etc. But if you look at the fundamental initial design, very little has changed today, and we're talking going on for 40 years now that this particular mandrel, if you like, the 680 series, has been around, and it just goes from strength to strength. From there, about 1995 or 96, the actual Silver Pigeon was born. So it was still the 680 series action, it was still scroll engraved, so it was called the 686, and they did one called the 686 Silver Pigeon. I haven't got one. I'll primarily even talk about the sporting range of guns because that's what we tend to sell here, Premier Guns. We do see a few older Beretta game guns, but 9 times out of 10, people come in and they're looking for a sporter because they want to shoot clays. So after that particular 686 Silver Pigeon, we then had the Silver Pigeon S. Now this is the first real gun in terms of Beretta that I remember selling, and these came out 1999, 2000-ish, I think, maybe a tiny bit later. And again, it was a variation of the theme. The 686, 680 series action worked so well. So all as they did is they changed the engraving ever so slightly. But other than that, that was it. So Silver Pigeon S, which if you look on the bottom, it will tell you that it's a Silver Pigeon S. So Silver Pigeon S, it has got the trident and the trigger guard. That was also on the previous model, which is the 686 Silver Pigeon. This Silver Pigeon S was the first gun that they kind of ditched the 686 number. It came back, so don't panic. And again, nickel action with this kind of floral engraving, a bit sort of wavy. And the thing was, it was very difficult to change a gun too much that works so well. And this did work well. If you went to a shooting ground, you know, in all fairness, and any time in the last 20, 25, even 30 years, the chances are you would have been given some kind of Silver Pigeon 686 to have a go with. And that ultimately comes down to the fact that they are so durable, so reliable, so universal that, you know, they just go and go and go and go. So this particular gun is a 28-inch fixed choke gun. This is about a 2003-2004 gun. So it was about this time they started to do 3-inch chambers across the range, starting of course with the 686, which is essentially the budget end of the Beretta. And the only thing, some of the competition guns, certainly the trap guns, tend to stay at 2 3/4 because I've always thought and always believed that on the continent they much prefer to have specific chamber length to specific cartridge lengths, whereas in this country we tend to sort of want one gun that does everything. So we're happy to buy a gun with 3-inch chambers and stick 2 3/4-inch cartridge in. But in Italy and also in Spain, when I went to Lambro, I discovered that's not quite the same theories. So Silver Pigeon S went until 2006-ish, 6 or 7, maybe a bit later than that. But in the interim, they brought back the 686 name, but only for the clay guns. So you could still buy a Silver Pigeon S, field gun, 28, 30-inch, and let's not forget they did small gauge as well, 20 bore, 28, etc. But in 1999, they launched this. So this is the 686E. So again, without trying to confuse everybody, it's a 686 action with slightly different graphics. Now, this was designed solely as a sporting gun, or solely as a clay gun, because they did actually make a skeet version and they did a trap version as well. And they had these quite funky, I think they called them ellipsis graphics at the time. So you got the nickel action with this more sort of clay looking, if you like, graphics. And also they funked it up a bit with the checkering as well. So the checkering, they started to use this, whereas you would traditionally have on any Beretta, this sort of double point checkering like we've looked at on the Silver Pigeon S and on the 686. Whereas what they did with this 686E, they put this laser style engraving on it. Just a bit sleeker, fitted nicely with the profile of the gun. And even though these came with flush multi-chokes, this was about the time that extended chokes became popular. People would buy something because they just wanted a clay gun to look a bit more sporty, a bit more rally-like, if you get my drift. And that was it really. So it was a standard 686 Sporter. It just looked, it was one of the first Berettas that just looked a bit different and a bit sportier, and that's all I can really say about it. So 686E, which you've got plastered on the side and also underneath. I mean, this is like a 2005 gun, but you know, still going really, really strong. At this point, they were using what's called true oil on the stock. Now, if you look at a modern Beretta, it will have like a semi-satin finish on the stock, whereas prior to, certainly prior to 2010, they used to use true oil, which is a Birchwood Casey product, but it's an oil that dries like a lacquer and it just makes it more durable. So if you're out in all weathers, the rain just literally runs off it, your stock will never swell, and it's just, like I say, it's a bit more weatherproof, certainly for UK. The reason they stopped doing it, I understand, was solely down to cost, because it's very labour intensive to apply it. It's nothing like the process they use for the semi-satin finish oiling today, and ultimately it costs too much money to stop doing it. You can, however, if you go to the factory, for example, as part of our VIP experience program, you can still have true oil finish as an option. But I think off the top of my head, it's about £1,000 because it's one man and 40 coats of oil. So like I said, very labour intensive. So they did stop it about 2006, 7, 8, something like that. But don't quote me on that. And from the 686E, the Silver Pigeon 1 was born. So those that have got a 686E might be screaming, oh, what about the Evo? Well, towards the end of the 686E model, they launched something called a 686 Evo. In terms of the standard sporting guns though, the Silver Pigeon 1 was born 2010. So what Beretta did is they reverted back to the sort of Silver Pigeon-esque graphics, nickel finish, little bit of scroll work, but other than that, the checkering style carried on from things like the 686E. You can buy one today, which is Optima HP, which is the high performance Optima choke system, with 3-inch chambers, steel shot proof, both fleur-de-lis and CIP. And what I'll do is I'll just show you the one that is bang up to date, which is here. So just to recap on our little 686 journey, initial 686, which was called a 686 Special, was 1983-ish to 1995 or 6-ish. 686E was late 90s, early noughties, right up to sort of 2019 really, if you look at the Evo models. Silver Pigeon S, 2002-ish. Up to 2010-ish when the Silver Pigeon 1, the previous model, the Silver Pigeon 1, obviously to the current model, 2010 to 2018, 19, and then I think 2019 was the latest facelift, and that's the gun we're going to have a look at now. So coming right up to date with the current model, we have the 2021 Silver Pigeon 1 Sporter. This gun has been around for, like I said, knocking on 40 years now, and the reason why Beretta keep producing it day in, day out, is because it just works so well. Whereas previously, if you look at particularly the last two Silver Pigeon models, the S and the first Silver Pigeon 1, it's a mixture of like acid and rolled on. Now things have moved on in terms of engraving, so what they are now doing is they're using laser. You look at something like an SL3, which is one of the top end of the premium range of Berettas, they are still engraved with lasers. It's just a question of they've got more lasers and different types of lasers. So what it does is it gives you different depths in the engraving. The light catches the engraving. It just gives it a slightly deeper feel. So again, a bit of traditional scroll work, some bunches of grapes in there, I think, to be honest with you, by the looks of things. I've never actually noticed that before, but that's what it is. But you don't have to look very far to see that very little has changed. The barrels are still produced in the same way in the factory, the cold hammer forge. You've got all the ribs are laid by hand, and it's so easy to see why the 686 Beretta in all of its guises is so popular with UK shooters, and we sell an absolute boatload of them. If we get someone that comes in and wants to borrow 2 or 3 guns for a sim day or something like that, 9 times out of 10 we'll give them a Beretta, because we just know they're not going to give any hassle. They will most likely shoot 24 grams, a lot of them will shoot 21s, which again on a sim day is just a much more comfortable way of shooting. And I think it's going to be a long time, just reverting back to the best-selling guns of 2021, it's going to be a long time before something comes along and knocks this off its perch, because they are just so good. So that pretty much covers the kind of the 686 story. I hope you found it informative. If you've got any questions about any of these guns, or you want a Beretta identifying, we've got tons of experience. We're always happy to help out with that, year of manufacture, etc, etc. And like I say, just drop us a message, give us a shout, comment below. Please remember to like and subscribe to the channel, because without you guys we couldn't keep producing it, because we wouldn't have the interest. And we'll look forward to seeing you soon.